Okay. I'll have a brief start. With a small introduction to you, Jens, you're head of tax at Bolt, and Bolt, of course, is the Estonian one of 5 or 6 unicorns uh, with around 3,000 employees, more than 50 million customers, 1.5 million drivers around the world in more than 40 countries, and I guess in all the continents. Is that the right summary?
I think not yet. No.
Not in all continents, yeah. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I know we're not in all continents yet.
Okay, but it's certainly in your plans, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Bolt is also developing this scooter rides quite rapidly. I see that it's in more than 100 countries across Europe and many other countries uh, also outside Europe. Um, I I struggle to define, is it sort of IT company, or do we need to uh, somehow put it in some boxes and we will talk about this later regarding taxation as well. But I read from, of course, from the description that it's IT platform that provides on-demand transport, cars, motorcycles, scooters, and e-bikes, and food for delivery from restaurants. And I see that you were also working for initially for a Big Four audit firm, but then mostly in the industry, and a lot of it related to e-commerce, like in Spotify and EA. Um, more Most companies are based in Switzerland, but you're originally from Denmark, right?
Yes, I am. I'm originally from Denmark. I have done international tax and transfer pricing my entire career, and that's also what ultimately ended up bringing me to Switzerland.
Mm.
I did. I started out with Deloitte, which I enjoyed a lot, and then I got the opportunity to consider joining the Danish incumbent telco operator,
Mhm.
Tele Denmark it was called at the time, as international tax manager. And this was when the 4G expansion, when the world really started to change into what we have today with on the technology side. It was very interesting, and I didn't sort of know what to do, but I thought I'll take a chance and see what happens. And then I can always go back to advisory, having learned something,
Mm.
and well, you can read obviously the history. I didn't go back to advisory. It was a lot of fun, and in the beginning. With Tele Denmark, we did because this was where all the telcos were expanding. So we did M&A everywhere, and had teams out negotiating 3 places. So I would be in different time zones. So I would be, and I was responsible for the tax and all of that. So I would be called during the night when they were sitting in negotiations with contracts and complicated clauses around taxation, and it was tremendous. We actually ended up doing at the time it's no longer the biggest, but at the time the biggest transaction by acquisition by a Danish company in the history, which was when we bought the 2 Swiss telco companies called Sunrise and Diax and
Mm.
merged them. And that value of that, I believe, was like 8.6, 8.7 billion euros at the
Wow.
time. So, and being, of course, responsible for the tax around that it was incredibly fun and interesting. And then, as we all know, right, the bubble burst. This was the first internet bubble, and it literally almost from one day to the next. everything died. And so I was, sitting there. Okay, now what? And of course you can. There's still things to do, but I was like, it may be time to move on. And this is when I got the opportunity to join Ferring Pharmaceuticals, which when I joined, I was supposed to. My job was to build and implement the Swiss principal structure, and then as part of that, when the Swiss headquarters was built, move to Switzerland as part of the people that was relocating there. And that's how I ended up moving in to Switzerland.
Mm-hmm. Exciting. And the other stuff that I told was that a fair summary of your sort of career path.
Yeah, I mean, I have I've had the opportunity and the luck to work in a bunch of different industries actually, right? Also pharmaceutical, which was Ferring, and then pharmaceutical device. And this was the first time I had the experience to work for an American multinational, which is its own sort of it's different. The American culture is different, and certainly around tax and how they manage taxes is quite different. And the American tax system, being the most complicated, I believe, on the planet, gives these special tax planning opportunities, which are very interesting from a tax geek point of view to get to work with and to understand. So that was very interesting. And then I've actually worked in something which has basically no technology at all, and that's was Owens, Illinois, which is the largest manufacturer of glass in the world. So, but not flat glass, not window glass, and that, but bottles and jars and all that. So beer bottles, fancy whiskey bottles, champagne bottles, Nutella, jars and that kind of stuff, which is a very different industry. And not something that worked with me as a person. I was there only 11 months. There's no development. Glass is a commodity, and then it becomes about cost, and that's not something that works too well with my who I am. So that's why I left that, and that's when I had the opportunity to join EA Electronic Arts, which obviously is a completely different and very much my style of company. And then of course from there to Spotify.
And out of all those fancy companies and industries, which one would you describe as your most interesting part of job or most interesting and challenging industry?
So the one I have now. I mean, it was incredible to join Spotify. I love music, right? And to be on that journey. We were 1,200 when I started, and when I left 5 years later, right, we'd taken the company public, and we were like 5,000 employees, and I built a team from myself to 20 something people with team in New York and in Singapore, and that was incredible and a lot of fun. But complexity wise, Bolt is the most difficult one and the most challenging one, which is a tremendous lot of fun, and the business is very complicated. If I may add a few, because it started with the ride hailing, right, when Marcus founded the company, but actually ride hailing is more than what we see. There are actually different kinds of ride hailing. We have another, which is, we call it business verticals, and we actually have several of those other than the ones that you mentioned, which I'll quickly just explain, and adding to the complexity of things also, for sure. And so the ride hailing, that's where it all starts, and that's still our main business, right? But it's getting relatively smaller and smaller to the other activities that we have. And the ride hailing, the traditional one, which we all know, has a sort of a cousin, which is the business side, where we contract with businesses in two different models. We actually can be a reseller of rides. So we buy the rides, and that's not the normal ride hailing model, right? but we can actually be a reseller of rides. So buying the rides from the driver, reselling them to, say, Sorainen, who needs a lot of taxi rides. And then instead of getting, hundreds and hundreds of invoices and people having to expend this and, a lot of admin, then you only get one a month. Right? So making that easier. There are some other advantages as well. So that's a different kind of ride-hailing business, having its own, vertical, as we call it, separate management. And then you're correct. We have the food, which is actually broader speaking, it's delivery. I mean, the idea is to go much broader on delivery, which we are looking at. So basically delivering all kinds of things from A to B, typically within a city or something like that, right? Not like a moving company. So that's a separate business working differently than the ride hailing, because there are more parties here, right? The ride hailing, you would typically have the driver, and you would have the boat, and you would have the rider, we call that, the person taking the taxi ride. Those three persons, right? In the business side, you will have something called a fleet as well, that we also interact with instead of the individual rider. So there's a difference to that as well. But in the food delivery, right, there are four parties, making it a little bit more interesting from a tax point of view, right? There's the restaurant selling the food. There is the person ordering the food, which we call eater. And then there's the courier delivering the food. And then there's both. So there are four parties to the setup, right? And that would be the case for other deliveries as well. And then we have the rentals, and you talk about the e-scooters and we e-bikes as well, and we call it micro mobility, right? And that is also something that is expanding a lot as we speak. And there, because there are assets on the ground in the different countries, we have to have the local VAT on the transaction, right? So we have to register in the countries where we have the scooters as well. And then actually we have a couple of newer verticals as well, which are very, very interesting. One has just launched in Estonia, which is car sharing, where people can share cars, and that is of course akin to the scooters, if you will, except there are some additional complexities to it because it's cars instead of small scooters, and especially from an expansion point of view, it comes with significantly added complexity, right? And it's really expensive assets as well, right? The scooters don't cost that much, but a car does. So there's a lot of interesting complexities to that as well. And then we also have another vertical. As of yet, I'm sure more will come. The business folks are incredibly creative, but we have also Bolt Market, which is also just launched in Estonia, which is about, and I don't know if you know about this, but it's in other countries, other companies have started this idea as well. And it's simply about delivery of groceries, but in a very different way, because you would say, well, why can't the supermarkets do this, right? They do it already. We can order online, and we can have it delivered, and we can. But this is different, because with the supermarket you can't have instant delivery, right? They can't come in 15-20 minutes with what you need right now. That's not possible. Then you actually have to go out yourself and get it, right? Which might not be possible or something that you want to do at that moment. So this idea is to have a market store, which is not a traditional grocery store. It is more sort of a warehouse where you have 1,500 to 2,000 of the types of groceries which you can find out that people need in situations like that, right? And I've run out of diapers would be one, right? Another one would be, we need some beer, right? So and or pizza or something, right, to cook, and so that warehouse will have all of these groceries, and then you can order via the app online, and then the idea is to have super fast delivery. So ideally 15 to 20 minutes, but of course, depending, it can take a little longer, right? So that's the idea, and this is also something that we are looking at, expanding very, very rapidly. And of course, which gives an additional, you can imagine now the tax side of all this, right? Additional complexity to everything. I can guarantee you that. So this is sort of what we're looking at now, and then there are other things in the works as well. And the idea is, right, if it is sort of obvious, right? We want to be a platform for all things sort of delivery, right? Broadly speaking, right? And movement, transportation of persons, right? And so that's the idea, and this is sort of, so whatever else we come up with developing the business will fit into that, right? So of course there are certain synergies to be picked up. So that's what we are looking at right now, and we're expanding, as fast as we can run, basically. So.
I can imagine tax authorities going crazy, especially qualifying anything that is cross-border and especially with those all types of new services. What other types of new services are in your minds? I saw that one of your competitors was using McLaren for taxi ride. So it got enormous attention. Anytime soon, you expect driverless cars or something fancy?
No, it's on the radar screen, right? But first, right now, we're looking at sustainability, right? One of our values, one of our key values is sustainability in everything we do, right? So we really actively try to the initiatives that we do, we try to incorporate the sustainability angle there, right? And with like for instance with the cars, right, going electric cars as much as possible, right? Certainly also with the car sharing, right? The cars are going to be electrical vehicles, that kind of stuff, right? So that we that's one of our values. So that's something that we're considering. But the driverless cars, I mean, yes, right. But I still think it's quite a lot out there yet, quite far out there yet still.
Right. It seems like from one of the previous episodes of Tech Stories with Carl Berlin from Orsted, that we spoke a lot about sustainability. It sounds like Scandinavian countries are sort of drivers to that movement. Is that right?
Yes, and I mean it very much is, it's encouraged, and you will have, if you for instance think about, I lived in Stockholm, right, for 4 years working for Spotify, and one of the things, so the authorities, Sweden is very much they're the leader on all of this, right? I mean, I would say, and of course the rest of the countries in the Nordics are following pretty healthily, but in Sweden, and you, for instance, certain things, if you want to be somebody who can take passengers up at Arlanda Airport in Stockholm, you need an electronic vehicle. Otherwise you're not allowed. Right? So there are all these things, and they're trying to incentivize, all across all of this, and I think this is just increasing more and more, right? So sustainability is going to conquer everything, right? And you would have to adopt sustainability into all decisions you make in a business.
Right. We started with the description of what Bolt is and what Bolt's business is, but I wanted to step back and start with you, Jens. And I know you are Danish by nationality. What do you think of the last football game between England and Denmark? Was the penalty fair?
I have not spoken to anybody who, by even my British colleagues or anybody else that could see a penalty there. There was no penalty, right?
Yeah.
When you're a referee, right? In the heat of things, I mean, you making mistakes, fair enough. That's why the VAR system is there. And I don't know what they were doing, sleeping or something, because this is the whole purpose of that system, to capture something like that.
Yeah, I was sure they will overrule the referee's penalty, but somehow they left it. So I was. But actually, that's a really good movement. I saw the football getting fairer now, and with those video checks, so it's going in the right direction at least.
Yeah, I think so too. There was a lot of criticism to begin with, but I actually think net it's a positive contribution. Yes,
Yeah.
I think so.
And on your Facebook account, I saw there's a guitar. Are you playing guitar?
So, so I very much as I told you, I like music a lot, and broadly speaking, I like rock and roll. Right, that's a lot of things, and I'm interested in a lot of things. Musically, it's sort of it's sort of like the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, mainly speaking, and the guitar is my my favorite instrument, and actually, I have three guitar players that there are many incredible guitar players out there, right? I have three that have had a special meaning for me, and the first one is David Gilmour of Pink Floyd, and the second one is Angus Young from AC/DC, and the third one is Slash from Guns N' Roses. And at some years ago, I had this dream that I wanted one of each of their signatory guitars hanging on the wall, because they're beautiful. They're pieces of art, actually. The guitars, right? Especially when they have wood, because they're unique. And so so that was my dream, and I was like, well, which one then to start with? And I decided to start with the Slash from Guns N' Roses, and of course each of those, because they have 150, 200 guitars that they play, right, of all kinds of different kinds. So you have to figure out which are the key ones, right? And for Slash, he had two. He plays Gibson Les Paul, as you can see from the right. Mainly, that's his main guitar, and he plays on the recordings that Guns N' Roses have made. He plays a 1959 Gibson Les Paul, and live he plays mainly a 87 Les Paul in a different like wood type, darker wood, and I went out looking for those, and it's very difficult to find someone in a good. I mean, Gibson 59 is obviously from 1959, right? So and if one in a meaningful quality and nicely looking, they are insanely expensive. I mean, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So that sort of wasn't really that much of an option, right? But then I got luck while I lived up in Sweden, and I saw that Gibson had made a replica of the 1959, so exactly like they made them in 1959, but new. And it still wasn't cheap, but I thought I have to buy that. So I did, and that's the one you can see on the picture. I didn't play guitar then, and I had actually no intention of learning to play the guitar. It was only to have them. I'm really good at playing air guitar, right? But but when I got it, when I opened it, there was like a delivery time for like a couple of months or something, and then when I got it, right, in this like really cool transport case, which had pink like velvet inside even, and I looked at it and I'm like, I cannot own this without at all being able to play it, just a little bit at least. So I decided to actually take a few lessons, and I did take lessons, so that after a little while, I actually figured out I actually could play a little bit, and sort of I got to the point where I could play the intro to one of Guns N' Roses' classical song called "Sweet Child Mine." that I could play that, and I could play the rhythm sort of to that. But I ended up, like, well, now what, right? Because to take it further, you actually have to start playing in a band and these kind of things. And that was not a priority for me. So it's been almost a year and a half since I've touched it to play. So I'm.
And speaking of your hobbies and leisure time, what apart your business? I saw that you were taking a year off to spend with your family. So what did you do then, and what are the maybe takeaways or suggestions to the listeners to consider?
So it actually ended up being more than that, and I really needed a break. Right? I had reached the point at Spotify where I loved my job there. It was until then the best job that I've ever had. I loved my team, and I loved the company. I still do. But I simply needed a break. So I decided to take a year at least, was my plan, off, to not to then use that year to like you typically hear, to then think about what my next move is going to be or something like that. Not at all. The plan was I will take 12 months and I will not at all think about what I'm then going to be doing. And actually I was not sure I would be going back to tax. And in it, besides spending time with my family, which is amazing and wonderful to get to do and participate more in everything. Then I actually started taking a very different direction in my in my life, and I started doing personal development workshops, and I've started 2 therapist qualifications. The one is a qualification as a family constellation therapist. And the other one is as a therapist under something called the Learning Love Institute. And I am still doing those and following those. They take, and it has taken longer also because of Corona, because a lot of the education and the training goes on in these workshops, and we haven't been able to have them physically. So we've of course worked online, and I have there's a lot of also reading to do. So I continue those. There's a spiritual side to it as well, and that has brought me tremendous value and personal understanding of who I am and how we function as human beings, and ultimately I hope to be of service to others, on some sort of part-time basis, assist the ones that are really, really good at these things, at workshops, to support, sometimes during the year, and that has been an amazing journey, and actually, in the beginning I was like, I'm just going to do this. But then actually Johan, the CFO of Bolt, has sort of lured me back into it. I mean, Johan is a good friend of mine. We were colleagues for 5 years at Spotify, right? And he left a little bit before I started my break to join Bolt, and he and I kept in contact. Of course, he was treasurer at Spotify, doing a lot of other things as well, actually, investor relations and taking part in the raising of capital and all of that, and we work very closely, right? Tax and those functions are very close, so we developed a really good relationship, and so he asked me to take a look at Bolt's tax situation, and this was in just before the Corona hit, actually, and I said, I'll do that, and I'll come over to Tallinn for a week, just pay me a ticket and a hotel, and I'll come over and I'll do that for you. And that was supposed to be in March last year. And then we know what happened. So I didn't go anywhere, and we had to do that all virtually, which I have to say I thought was a lot of fun, and getting to know a little bit the boat business, and I could see all the fun things there from a tax point of view. And then we kept in touch, and I told him sort of what I thought, what was the lay of the land, and what needed to be done, and what were the sort of the biggest rocks. And then he sort of lured me and said, well, can't you do a little sort of consulting? At that time there was one tax person, Marcus, right, who had been with Bolt for a few years, and was fighting it's completely impossible fight. And I said, all right, I'll do that. And then at the same time, I helped hire the second member of the team, and I started as a consultant for Bolt August 1, at the same time as Erki, the second team member, started as well. And I started 10 hours a week, which then in September became 20 hours a week, which then in October became 30 hours a week, and from November it was full time, and we agreed on I'll come and join Bolt as head of tax. And I worked as a consultant though until 1st of February this year, because we didn't have a company in Switzerland. So I established a company, and that I got employed formally in that as of February 1. So that sort of, and then as a welcoming present, Johan also gave me treasury and internal audit to manage as well. So I'm sort of embarking on that exercise too. So.
But going back to your learnings, this Learning Love Institute, is it about learning or about love, or both?
Well, our lives are about love, right? Yeah. So it's about learning how to love, right? How to have trust in yourself, how to have deep, intimate relationship. And that's how it's about. It's about getting inside ourselves, right? It's an inside journey other than an outside run. And so it's simply about learning, understanding who we are individually, and what has created us, our past, and all of us have wounds from typically our childhood. Some have tremendous wounds, right? And some have smaller ones, but we all have them, and they all affect how we interact, especially in intimate relationship, because that's where they get pulled out or they get triggered. And so understanding how that works enables you to understand yourself, and it also longer term to help others in that process. And what I have learned during this education or personal training has been tremendous. It's transformed my life fundamentally. And so I'm eternally grateful for having started that. And I'm actually going on a 10-day retreat in the first part of August in Italy, continuing that education. So
transformed your life in a way that you are paying more attention to the family, right?
And to
yourself.
Yes, because typically what happens is, you remember maybe Descartes, he said, I think, therefore I am, right? That is what he discovered there was the biggest mistake, because it isn't like that, right? You are not the thinker, right? You are the ones that can observe the thinking, just as well as we are not our feelings. We are the one that can observe our feelings or emotions, and just as well as we're not our body. We have a body, right? We're also not our mind. We have one, right? That thing would like to control us though, right? And that's the trick, is to get out of that and shut that up as much as possible, and only use it as the tool it really is, right? It isn't us. We're not it, right? It would like us to believe that, but we're not. And so that's the whole trick. And understanding how that works, right? Then you can start digging into yourself and finding out your individual wounds, right? From right, and then you can pull them out and you can work with them. And as far as I'm concerned, I had a, let's say, pretty traumatic childhood, right? Even from conception. And so that means you carry a huge baggage, which in order, when you're a child, you can't, the emotions that are triggered in you cannot handle those as a child if there's not an adult supporting you. And if there's not an adult supporting you, you develop these different coping mechanisms, right? Which you cannot, so you have to dissociate from the feelings, right? To not, because you can't, it will literally kill you if you actually feel them. So you dissociate from, it doesn't mean they go away, right? You suppress them, they're still there, right? And feelings you don't feel, they don't go away. It's like putting money in the bank when we got positive interest, that is, right? So they're there, and they grow and they grow and they grow, right? And and many of us, like me, if you're afraid of those feelings, right? Because I feared that they would kill me if I let them out. They won't, right? But that's what it. So you keep pushing them down with different kinds of coping mechanisms, right? Which can be all kinds of addictions as well, right? And addictions doesn't have to be drugs or alcohol or something like that. It can also be, it can be work, it can be sport, it can be, all sorts of things, right? Keeping yourself busy all the time, so you don't have, so it doesn't, right? You keep the lid on, and the trick is to find that lid and actually open it. And once you do, obviously all sorts of things come out, right? But that's a condition to work with it. Otherwise, you're never going to move on, and you're going to stay in the past and in the reactions and the patterns of the past, because that's all you know. And so this is the journey, right? Getting all of these things out and work with them and heal them as much as you can and understand them. So that's the journey that I've been on. And if you imagine that, in my case, right, my life was from here and up. So from my neck and upwards, I was in my head. I had no connections to my emotions at all, or my feelings. I didn't know. I always tried to figure things out in my head, right? And that's when you make some huge mistakes, right? Because you don't listen to, like, the gut feeling thing. You don't listen to, this is wrong, or this person is not good for you, right? And especially also in relationships, you sort of try to assess the person objectively, like with your mind, and your body is telling you to walk away, right? Or the other way around, or this person isn't qualified, and you actually have your feelings are very positive, right? If there's no connection. So for me, it was about finding, if you will, the door, right? Open the door inside and actually connect with all of that, right? And ideally, you would have like a 6-lane American highway, so you're connected with your feelings and your emotions, right? And I think that I've been able to develop into a healthy, sort of nicely asphalted, like, country road now. So there's a connection, and the difference is in your life, in the quality of your life, and in how you relate to the ones that matter to you the most is enormous. So I can recommend everybody to do parts of such a journey for themselves.
It's interesting. Now I'm having my annual holiday, and during that holiday, I'm reading a book exactly along those lines, how to improve relationship in my family. So, any authors or books you can recommend to our listeners on some topics that have, as you say, transformed your life?
So I'll show you the shelf. So there you have the book so it's very we're all individual, right? And we all have different histories. I mean, we function the same, actually, all of us, right? The structure, but our history obviously is the same, and the you know the what has happened to us, right, is different, right? So it right, it depends on what your history is, right? But it starts with understanding yourself, right? This is all about ourselves. Always, actually, it has nothing to do with the outside. It's all about us. So that's the way we need to look, right? It's inside yourself, and not look at, if you talk about family and your partner, she does this and she does that. No. Me, right? It's all look. It's difficult, right? Right? It's not you make me something, because they don't actually. It's all about and that's to get to that and understand that is a huge step, right? I would start. I would very highly recommend the books written by Eckhart Tolle. You may have heard about those. There are two, and I'll show you two key ones. And so the first one he wrote, and this is what really fundamentally changed things, right? It's the power of now. I can incredibly highly recommend starting with something like this. And I actually read this one first. I read the second one first, which is called A New Earth, and which is it's amazing. And when I read it, I had he put things clear in just in a magnificent way of how it all sort of ties together. And for me, it's like, yes, this is exactly how it is. And I just deeply felt that, but that understanding, was profound, right? And really has just then, sunk deeper and deeper in as the time has gone by. And I've read both of them several times because there's so much in there, and that clearly is what I would recommend as a starting point. So not start, which is a different place. It will give you an understanding about yourself and how we work as human beings, which then forms a really good foundation for digging deeper into your specific situation, right, and your specific life and your specific history, right? Because it's all about, when it comes to this personal development thing, right, it's all about what happened to us, because it's what happened to us that have created who we are and have created all of these I guess protections which we needed back then, which now are maladaptive and which do not serve us any longer.
Wow.
So this is I could really go on about this, for it would be like a series of it is amazing what it does, right? And I'll say it started all for me. It actually started up with I had a friend up in Sweden who had done some trainings. Actually, the training was called Training for Life at an institution called Bara, which means in English just be, up in Dalarna, up in Sweden. And there are several of similar type of institutions. There's also one here in Switzerland, and I'm going to one in Italy. Some countries have several of them. This is where this kind of stuff goes on, right? And she recommended me, knowing a little bit me about my history and all, said, yeah, you have to go up there. And I felt, and I looked at it, and based on what she told me, and she's taken this training for life, which is 12 workshops of a week plus something else, right, over a year and a half, where you go and you go to different kinds of trainings, right? And so and I thought this is this is for me, but I found my ego essentially found excuses not to go. So I actually booked like a 5 day. It starts with 5 days, and it's called Door Opener 1, right? And it's about opening the door, and not the outside door, but the door inside, right? And I knew I had to do it. I knew it was right for me, but I kept postponing it and finding an excuse. Oh, work, blah blah blah, right? Because I was afraid of what would happen. And so I ended up moving it several times and canceling it. And then ultimately, when I realized I had to take a break, the first thing I did was I booked the first one that I could do, this Door Opener 1. They do like 10 times a year up there. And I went, and this was like roughly 2.5 years ago. And it was exactly just much more profound what I knew it would be. And it did to me exactly what I inside knew it would, right? It really opened a world, right? And I would say for me, because I'm relatively sort of fucked up from my childhood, right? At that time, I didn't open the door, right? I would say I found where the door was, right? And now it's of course open and everything. And that was amazing. And I'm telling you, if all world leaders would do that Door Opener 1, there's a Door Opener 2 and 3, and if they would do, I say even just the one, but those three different workshops, we would have no war on the planet, right? Really, I mean, it is that amazing, right? You really just find in and understand, and all of these things, right? The war, they're driven by fear, fearful men. It's all about fear driving, right? They're afraid, really, right? And of course afraid, fearful with massive egos on top, right? It's like really not a healthy combination, that, right? And so it's profound, and I can highly recommend. I'll send you the link to do that for yourself, right? If you really want to do something for yourself, which then in turn will benefit your family and the ones that you love, not only your family but your friends, and even if you ask me a little bit, also the universe, because the energies that will come out of you will change, right, into something much more high frequent positive, rather than low frequent sort of dark negative, maybe sometimes, right? It's a 5 day seminar. You spend, let's say, traveling, let's say total of a week of your life. It doesn't even cost that much. It's total, including everything, would probably be 2,000 euros, including the travel, even from Estonia. So it's it's not an investment of like you have to not feed the kids for 6 months or anything. I will bet you that you would, I mean, totally understand then what I say, and you would feel a transformation. The thing with this is, and that's also, by the way, reading Eckhart Tolle's books. If you do that and you really read them and you're ready for it, right? There's no going back. You can't go back to then what was before, because there's something called awakening involved, right? And once you've woken up, right, and that term is very it's consciously, right? You wake up, because actually before, at least partly, and a lot of us, like very deeply, you actually were not awaking. You're not woken up. You hadn't woken up, right? You were somehow sleeping, or somehow what you call unconscious, you would call it, right? And what you awaken to is you see, you start developing consciousness, which is really what it's all about. And there's no going back, right? That's the thing. You can't undo that, right? So once you've taken that, right, and it can happen to even reading Eckhart Tolle's books, then you've taken a step, and then there's no going back. It will actually change you.
Great.
yeah, so I recommend highly to do something like that. Right.
Great stuff, Jens. I will post the links to in description of the podcast to our listeners as well, so that they can check it out. And I remember that in one of the initial, I think it was episode number 2 of this podcast, that there was a guy from Cyprus, Philippos, who was a tax partner at one of the largest Cyprus law firms, and suddenly he started to ask himself these big questions, and now he ended up writing a book about happiness, and finding himself those answers, and now he's a business coach, and these are this is very brave, and these are huge steps to for our life to ask these questions and look around for answers. So I really admire what you have done so far, but you still return to tax. Uh, I I wanted to, as our podcast is called Tax Stories, so that uh, I wanted to ask, is there a story from your experience, or from anything else related to tax that comes to your mind, that is could be of some interest to our listeners?
There are many, right? I mean, I would say what you know, uh, a change happened for me from from a tax perspective. I started out, like most people, at least, back then, it was about tax planning, the geeky side, right? If it's legal, we'll do it. That kind of approach, right? And if it gives results that are undesirable from the fiscal point of view, you can change the laws, right? That approach, not about cheating or anything like that, right? And that's totally off the table. But you would go to the line, right? In your planning, right? And this was the time when exactly, this tax had a huge say in business. I mean, as I said, the tax model, the principal structure, right, actually meant that a pharmaceutical manufacturing plant and a global head office was built at the Lake of Geneva for Ferring Pharmaceuticals, right? That was driven by tax, right? The owner, private owner, Frederick Paulsen, he didn't want to pay tax, right? And it's a little bit like actually the owner of IKEA, who also did sort of a similar thing, right? And moved to Switzerland. He actually lived quite close to where we lived, also in the same part of Switzerland. And that I drove that, and that was, technically it was a lot of fun, and you felt you added value. And then the world sort of started changing, right? You saw this, it became in the news much more, and there was this thing about this aggressive tax planning and the unfairness of the whole thing, right? Throwing that word in there, right? Fair share of tax. And I worked at EA at the time, right? And was responsible, for the out of US taxes, and I started, right. We had a head office, an international head office in Geneva, and a tax ruling, as appropriate, and all of that. And I started, right. I would get questioned. We established a tax task force to make sure that we kept, the requirements for the ruling, and that the structure was defendable, right, under audit, and under audit in other countries as well, right, because it was a Swiss principal structure, so you would have low risk distributors out in the countries, right, and then the principal would be in Switzerland, and there'll be a withholding tax-free royalty flowing out to I forget, Bermuda or Cayman Islands, one of those, so to keep it safe, and keep the conditions of the ruling. And so we had a lot of senior people in Switzerland running the worldwide business, right? And they, a lot of them, right, came and wanted to. I can do my job much better in London. I can do my job much better in somewhere else, because that's where the relevant the relations that I need to have, they are right. I actually from Switzerland here. It's my life is more difficult, and I have to travel all the time to do my job, and I would much rather just live in, say, London, right? And so can I go, right? Can I move to London? They would have to ask me, right? And I would say I'll be the guardian of the tax model, and I'm going, no, you can't, right? Because then we can't defend the substance, and that. That I think it must have started earlier, right? But that really then became constant. It's like, seriously, right? That's not how it's supposed to work, right? And I really changed there. And it's like, I like, no, this is simply not the way. Tax was effectively driving the business, right? And I even did some pretty sophisticated calculations with some help from some of the finance folks around whether this actually was profitable at all, the whole model, right? And how much it was, and it turned out up till then it actually hadn't been profitable, right? Because if you have losses, then it becomes very expensive, these models, right? You have to be quite profitable, right? For them to make sense. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I simply don't want to be the one telling the business how to run itself. I mean, it makes no sense, right? The business should run itself the way the business needs to run itself best, because that's what ultimately gives the best result for the company, right? I mean, who knows how much revenue or growth of the business that was lost because of all the limitations that were on how to run it. We will never know because you can't calculate that, right? But that was my thing. I'm not going to do this anymore. I want the right tax should layer on top of the business. The business decide how it needs to run itself, how it needs to structure itself, right? And then tax follows that, right?
Sure.
Doesn't mean you can't be clever. Doesn't mean you can't, optimize. And there are all sorts of planning considerations you need to make. It's just different ones, right? You end up, otherwise you end up bleeding yourself to death in taxes, right? And because of the way that things work. So it's not, I'm not arguing that. And that's when I took that approach, right? And then I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I wanted to see also if the wings could carry. I had disagreements with my boss. I mean, very, very smart guy and a good guy, the boss that he's still the boss tax boss at EA, right? Keith. And it's like, I want to try. And then I got the call from Spotify, and I got the opportunity to go and do exactly all of that. And as part of the interviews, I look, I'm not going to do aggressive tax planning. There's no way I'm going to do that, right? I'm going to certainly be clever, right? But the business drives. And then Daniel Ek, right, the founder of Spotify, he said, look, but that's all you, right? You decide that. It's not our culture to do aggressive tax planning. We're not involved in that, right? We want to pay our fair share of taxes where we do business, right? And you drive that. So that was how, and then it started, right? And from that point of view, my approach to tax has been that, right? Business drives, and we support and of course optimize within what are the possibilities for the business to. So
what's your feeling? These tax-driven structures are still in place, or the latest worldwide developments have changed that movement? That basically these are winding up.
No. I think it's much less, right? Because the benefit from doing them is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, right? And you have to have a pretty solid margin of tax, right? That you can save 2, 3, 4 percentage points doesn't justify putting these things in place, right? Because of the complexity, managing them, the cost of running them, right, et cetera, et cetera. You have to maybe be in countries that are expensive like Switzerland, and so it for sure is already diminishing, right? Already, and I am, I'm happy about that. I don't have the slightest issue with all of the BEPS work. I think it has been helpful also in that regard. I don't have a problem with the global minimum tax. I mean, at all. I think that's it only makes sense, right? And so I'm what I have a problem with is the pillar 1 of action 1, right? It's the more money out to the market countries, right? I mean, it's a political decision, so it is what it is, right? Because it's an allocation of taxing rights ultimately, right? It didn't start like that, right? OECD started to sort of try to squeeze it under the arm's length principle, right? This is just, we now interpret things a little bit differently, and it's still the arm's length principle because value is created out there. The thing is, it isn't, right? The value is created not by somebody consuming something. The value is created by the people developing what is consumed, whether it's goods or services, and that, the data, the value of the data, which is one of the things that have been discussed. But the data, dead data, has no value, right? You and I are walking repositories of immense amounts of dead data. Data only become valuable when somebody starts mining it, and when somebody starts using what they mine to do clever things with, right? Which can drive the business, and that value is created where the people doing these things are, not with ones, And so I profoundly disagree with the whole that value is created in India because they're consuming something, right? And they're a big market. No, they're not, right? And those things, by the way, are taxed with consumption taxes, not with corporate income tax, right? So I've argued against, but we are where we are, right? And if the global community wants to allocate more money to the market countries for political reasons, all right, then that's what we do, right? That's a decision, right? But it has nothing to do with value creation, right? And so here we are, and have to obviously manage that, which is it's massively complex. I don't know how much you've read it and followed it. It's hugely complex thing, right? And it's going to get even more complex before they pull it over the finish line. I think, right?
Of course, this is a huge topic, but is that the biggest issue on your table right now, or some other tax issues are currently more pressing?
No, there are one. So the complexity of our business is a huge challenge, and the complexity of our business relative to that, the world still to a large degree isn't ready for this kind of business. So the rules are made 20, 30, 40 years ago that we're trying to adapt to this, and that there's a huge degree of uncertainty for a lot of things here, and that's a huge challenge, but it's also a lot of fun though, right? Because it's the figuring it out, and we're treading the very forefront of all of this, and that is a lot of fun, right? For me, and in Bolt, right, we're also in a lot of exotic countries. We're in the African countries, we're like in the CIS countries, we're embarking on these, and we're really good business-wise in those countries. But of course, the taxation in those countries is really, really complicated, and it's different, and the cultures are different, so there are some huge challenges there in those countries, and taxes can actually be detrimental to business cases in those countries, which is really sad, and which is the flip side of us wanting to pay our fair share, right? It becomes then in these cases, and also with what's being talked about in other countries with the digital service tax and these things, right? It becomes, but can we please only pay our fair share, right? It has sort of flipped over to that almost. So it's a completely different sort of environment that we're in, and that is finding our feet in that is a tremendous challenge, which again for me is a lot of fun, right? And we can add a lot of value if we if we get it right, and still are able to actually support the growth of the business despite these really difficulties. And if I may add one thing to that, one of the real problems I do have is the Estonian tax treaty network, because frankly speaking, it ain't very good, right? And in a lot of the countries that we're in, well, either the treaty isn't that good or there isn't one, and that of course presents additional challenges, right? Especially if you're competing against somebody like Uber, right, based in the Netherlands, right? that has probably the best tax treaty network of them all, right? So they have the support of all of that, which actually gives them competitive advantages in quite a few of the countries that we're in, which is of course very unfortunate, from that point of view.
And you have been working in so many countries and industries across the world. So, what in your mind are the best jurisdictions tax-wise, and looking at both the tax systems and tax authorities?
Oh, I think that's, I can tell you a lot about the ones I think are the worst ones. No, but I have come to like very much the Estonian system. I have to say, I mean, again, the treaty networks is definitely very much work in progress, right? And we need to do something to support maybe the government in that, But I mean, the Dutch are very good. I actually think the Danish system is pretty good too. The Swedish system is really good as well. I've worked a lot together with the Swedish Ministry of Finance around fighting the European digital service tax, which we succeeded in actually killing it, which was an incredible effort and a huge victory, for us and for the business in Europe, because it's meaningless. It's a meaningless tax. So I think by the Dutch is also good. One that is not very good, right, is the American one. It's like Brazil, if it's the complexity of that thing, and India, right, is also just crazy from a tax point of view, and some of the African countries are also really, really difficult, right?
And tax authorities?
Yeah, we have. But I think again, the Estonian tax authorities are very, reasonable and cooperative, and I find also again Sweden and Denmark, the Scandinavian countries, the Dutch for sure, right? The Dutch tax authorities are very, very good, and always professional, right? And even have a business sense too. So that those are really good. One particular tax authority that I really have a grudge with right now, in particular, because I have some issues with them that are just, has no meaning whatsoever, is the South African one. So we have two issues, right? One of them is, and this is how crazy the world is down there, right? So we made a mistake. This was before I joined, and we didn't pay VAT on our ride-hailing commission as we should have done since 2019, because what we did was we of course approached the tax authorities and said, look, we've made a mistake, right? Can we correct this, please? But that's the approach, that's the right way of doing things, right? And so we did that, and this was again before I joined, and the South the yes you can. And then we want to issue like a massive penalty and late payment interest, and then the negotiation led to that the penalty was waived, and we then paid the VAT due and the late payment interest, which you can't get out of, but the penalty, because we approached them ourselves, right? So far so really good. And then it didn't take very long, then we got an assessment because they wanted interest on the penalty that had been waived. And we then told them, but how is that possible? Because you waived the penalty, and so it's an interest on something that doesn't exist, and it's a zero. And we're still fighting that with the South African tax authorities. This is now a year, and they keep insisting they want interest on this non-existing penalty. So that's how crazy it is. The other one, which is sort of down the same line, is that at some point we crossed a threshold for going from bi-monthly to monthly VAT filing. Now, the rules are that the tax authorities are supposed to tell you when you do that. And now we want you to file monthly. They didn't tell us that. And then, which of course meant we filed late, because we didn't know that we were supposed to file earlier. We'd fallen into the new group. So of course, the South African tax authorities then issued us that's the standard. They issued a 10% penalty of the late filing, which is like 100,000 euros. It's a lot of money. 100,000 euros in penalty for something we didn't know. They hadn't complied with their own rule. So we told them this, how is this meaningful? And that one we're also fighting still, because they think it's meaningful to charge us a penalty for a rule we didn't really break, actually. So that's the South African tax authority for and so.
And for helping in all those fights, how do you choose outsourced tax service providers, and what would be an ideal tax service provider? For example, would you prefer some online platform where you can see all the development of your documents, their speed, can comment them online, see the lawyer's time cards, and rate them with stars like your drivers?
Actually, that's an interesting thought, right? And the whole collaboration thing, right? So working on shared documents, like, for instance, we do that a lot on the team, like Google Docs, right? So we have a lot, and even across the company, right? We contribute to all of these things, all of us. So it's like, live documents, and you have like one, right? Instead of 8 different versions of the same thing, and which you haven't filed appropriately, right? And you don't know where they are, and which one is actually now the final, all of that. So there are huge advantages to that, right? And I think for me that'd be a good thing, right? That'd be something we would like. I can guarantee you that, right? But so that really constructive idea there. I mean, there's of course a lot of countries and a lot of cultures and law firms or advisors that, oh no, we can't do that because of this, that, and the other risk and all of that, and which is ultimately all bollocks in the end, right? It makes no sense, right? But that's the again, fear ruling here. Oh well, we can't, But actually, when it comes to choosing advisors, for me, it's very much the person. It's not about Ernst & Young hat, Deloitte hat, Baker McKinsey hat. No, it's about who you are. What's of course your technical capacity and experience, and how you are as a person, right? That has to fit too. And how do you provide your service? So it's like a holistic approach. And for me, that's how I do it, right? So we work with all kinds of advisors everywhere, the ones that we think are the best in whichever country for whichever type of tax question that we use, right? So we use Sorainen, of course, for things. We use Ernst & Young. We use actually all of the big four, even, and we use Baker McKinsey. We use McDermott, Will Emery. We use a bunch of local firms, which I have learned because of my history and all the work that I've done all over the world. You get to know people that are good, right? And that's who we work with primarily, right? And then adding to this, not paying reasonable money for top quality advice is the dumbest thing you can do in tax, right? Good tax advice always comes with a price, right? And cheaping out on that is the dumbest thing you can do, right? Doesn't mean that we are accepting ridiculous fees for things, but it means you have to pay a reasonable fee, which is sometimes not cheap, or can be quite expensive. A lot of money. I'll say expensive is more than the value, but a lot of money. But that's just what you have to do, because not doing that is going to end up costing you way more than you say, right? So that's my sort of approach.
And with those words, I'm conscious we're running out of time, and I truly thank you. And probably you know that I finish my podcasts with a traditional question about your version of meaning of life. We spoke about this a little bit earlier, but what would be your summary of that?
So the meaning of life,
yes,
it's actually the same for all of us, and it is to become conscious. Because life is consciousness itself, right? There's one life, we're all it. We are expression of consciousness. We are expression of consciousness manifesting itself in us, you as well, right? When we are no longer here in the form that we have now, so we leave our body, right? We leave our mind and everything. We go back to what we truly are in our innermost core, right? Which is consciousness itself or existence. God, actually, right? So the expression that, Jesus was the Son of God, right? Yes, so are you, and so am I, right? And your wife is the daughter of God. We've just forgotten it because of all this that's been piled upon, but that's actually who we really are. So purpose of life is to become conscious.
Great words. So Jens Svolgaard, thank you very much